Hello there ladies and gentlemen, TX141 here, also known as Paul, bringing you another Ace in a Day gameplay for the arcade mode of War Thunder. In today's episode, I shall be reviewing the LaGG-3-8. To provide you with a brief historical overview of the Lavochkin-Gorbunov-Gudkov 3 and the variant depicted here in War Thunder, we must go back to 1939, and the response of the three aforementioned designers to the call by the Soviet Air Force for a modernisation of its arsenal. Their response, as headed by Lavochkin, was the LaGG-1, a monoplane fighter designated for the interceptor role. The design, conceived over the course of 1939, was rather unique in its wooden airframe, and additionally its low wing layout, enclosed cockpit and retractable main landing gear. The first prototype, I-22, flew for its initial test flight as of March the 30th, 1940, to a very poor review, with the test pilot saying that the plane was underpowered in the engine department and very difficult to handle. As a result, I-22 went back to the design board and was redesignated I-301 under the LaGG-3 project, the successor to the failed LaGG-1 project. The plane was uprated in terms of its engine, now fielding a newer supercharged Klimov M105 PF inline engine, providing 1,240 horsepower. Additionally, slats along the leading edge of the wings were added. As a result, in the latter half of 1940, the LaGG-3 prototype I-301 received its initial test flights to much greater success, and following on from this, the LaGG-3 entered production service as of 1941. With 66 variants and 6,528 aircraft produced in total by August 1942, when the LaGG-3 production line ceased to exist, the LaGG-3 never saw service in the intended role of interceptor, thanks to the fact it was far inferior to the German Messerschmitt 109F series fighter, along with other German Luftwaffe components. Nonetheless, the overall versatility of the LaGG-3 in a number of other roles, including but not limited to bomber escort, ground attack, and interceptor of planes such as German bombers and recon aircraft, meant that the LaGG-3 stayed in service up to 1944. As a result, whilst it was not intended to be used in these roles, the LaGG-3 saw notable service and was able to form a key backbone of the Soviet Air Force, especially after the arrival of the Lavochkin-5 or LA-5 in 1942. And the variant we see here in War Thunder, the LaGG-3-8, is rather interesting in the fact it's not really a variant. The 8 designation does not mark out any particular change in the aircraft's characteristics or design features, but more so in the fact that we are looking at the 701st through to the 800th of the production aircraft. Every time 100 LaGG-3s were produced in a factory, the designation of LaGG-3 and then an integer increased by 1. So after 100 aircraft, this would have gone from LaGG-3-1 to LaGG-3-2 and so on. As a result, we are looking at an early version of the LaGG-3 with very few and very limited refinements, if anything, coming around probably in the first half of 1941. The only major refinements occurred with the later series, especially the final series, the LaGG-3-66, as the plane ended its production life. Additionally, we should note that historically the LaGG-3 and LaGG-3-8 are quoted to have fielded two 12.7mm Brezin machine guns above the engine and a 20mm Shvat cannon firing through the propeller hub. Meanwhile in War Thunder, we only have one 12.7mm machine gun mounted rightwards above the engine and a 20mm Shvat cannon firing in the same condition through the propeller hub. And as a result, how exactly does the LaGG-3-8 handle in War Thunder? To me, this is a plane of two halves. It has a lot of good qualities and a lot of terrible qualities which offset these good ones. We are in a gameplay featured on the ground strike map Green Ridge, and as we go to intercept a number of the enemy bombers coming out of spawn, we are using the following setup. Stealth ammunition for our 12.7mm machine gun, and the reason for this is because of its incendiary components, 2 armor-piercing incendiary rounds followed up by a single intermediate adjustment incendiary, and the fact that the stealth ammunition complies very well with the cannon belt we are using. The 20mm cannon belt we are implementing today is the ground attack belt, featuring 3 high explosive fragmentation incendiary rounds and a single armor piercing tracer round to boot. All of the high explosives, I believe, as well also have the tracer component within them, and we will come onto this a little bit further after taking down this G4M1 Betty. Here we are going to see a key gameplay tip in general, as well as how powerful the LaGG-3-8's armament is. The G4M1 pilot is quite smart here. They decide to dive before going into a seesaw motion, constantly going up and then down. And I quickly realise the only way I'm going to hit them is if I try to hit them in the peak and trough of their overall pattern. As we can see, when I hit them in the peak, I managed to set their right wing on fire and leave them to die for my second kill. I thereby progress over towards an enemy PBY, very gradually, to intercept another bomber to make it free. But in the meantime, let us come back to our setup. The reason why I implement the ground target belt, and hopefully I can justify this over the course of this gameplay, i.e. for the cannons, is because at your battle rating of 2.0, rank 1, you see very few planes with a lot of armour on them, bar some of the heavier bombers at the battle rating, such as the PBY and the H6K. This means that when the high explosive fragmentation rounds are directly incident on target, they usually have maximal damage, taking off key components or indeed ripping wings off entirely. And as a result, this makes this plane an ideal killer of fighter and bomber alike. What's more, the 12.7mm stealth belt means that you are able to penetrate key components such as fuel tanks and set them on fire with your armour-piercing incendiaries and IAI. Yet the fact that I use the stealth belt is to compensate for the fact that the 20mm cannon has a rather low muzzle velocity of only 660 meters per second. This is equivalent to 110 meters per second more by comparison with the MG-FF German cannon, yet it is far below the muzzle velocity of, say, the British Hispano, at roughly 850 meters per second. And so, I need to be able to see the tracers of the cannon rather than the machine guns in order to get my pure deadly burst onto target. I used to fly this plane with the air target belt for the 12.7mm machine gun, but I found I could not always compensate enough for the tracer of the 20mm cannon. Nonetheless, I digress. We're using a 500 meter gun convergence as per normal, with armament in the nose and a 30-minute fuel load allowing us to make it towards the end of the game. And trust me, this is a very long match. With that being said, we now decide to dive down and try and boom and zoom a number of enemy targets. We start off by looking at a P-36A Hawk that is diving towards a friendly aircraft. We then look at another P-26 before looking at a third plane. It's a P-26A pea shooter, completely oblivious to our presence as we attack them for a boom and zoom run at approximately 735 km an hour. The reason I did not pursue the Hawk or the first pea shooter was because of the lack of the control that this plane has at higher speeds. Additionally, it was roughly over the spawn, and so I would have been a sitting duck for any incoming aircraft. I quickly notice as I go into a temporary Immelmann, a Beaufighter coming fresh out of spawn and breaking over towards its airfield. I realise that Beaufighter Mark 6Cs are absolutely deadly if encountered head on or allowed to get behind you, and so I go for the intercept with the Beaufighter having very little energy, and as we can see, we plant our intercept directly into their cockpit just before they come around for the head on, making our ace in a day. Fortunately for us, we had the speed to make the pass there, but as we're going to see throughout the rest of this video, the LaGG-3-8 suffers in one department, and that is still the engine's performance, which is something which was attempted to be rectified with the LaGG-1 to LaGG-3 transition. As we look at an enemy MC-200, we realise that there are no planes coming out of the enemy spawn, and so we've got a clear shot on target. Yet, the MC-200 very quickly breaks underneath us and goes into a semi-dive, which is exactly what the MC-200 needed to do to dodge our burst. We then go to pick on a LaGG-3, and we see they are gradually breaking onto the back of a friendly aircraft, but to not much success. So we go to pick up the LaGG-3-8 as they come out of their pass, clipping their right flap and nothing more. We then continue on our way, not turning around or hesitating for anyone, and we go to pick on either a G50 or an I-153 Chaika. It is soon to be the Chaika, and as we can see here, one high explosive round is all you need to take a biplane out. And so, as we come around once again with our 6th kill in the bag, we see the enemy G50 get taken out by 2 friendlies, well 3 friendlies I should say, and we come around onto the back of a P-36A Hawk, very gradually at our speed of roughly 400 km an hour and decreasing. Here we allow our friendlies to get the kill shot, and as we line ourselves up to make a shot of our own, we can see that whilst we did not get the kill, the 120mm cannon round that we landed onto target completely set the fuselage of the P-36 in flames, and this really does go to show that even planes with limited armour such as the P-36 are very vulnerable to those cannon rounds if they are planted onto target correctly. And now we move on to a major pitfall of the LaGG-3-8, and that is its overall engine performance, whether at low, medium or high altitude. Here at roughly 1350 to 1400 meters altitude, I'm struggling to build up my speed and climb simultaneously, something I could normally do in say a Yak-1 or an I-16, the two Russian equivalents at your battle rating. We fortunately see a PBY come directly towards us as at this point, and so we make the most of the opportunity and aim towards the cockpit, making for a rather thorough and easy 7th kill. We then break away in order to avoid running into the enemy planes that are causing an ensuing furball over the ships in the centre of the map, and we are once again going to see that at 330 km an hour we are struggling to accelerate well and build up our altitude. And now here's an important point going on in the background. A couple of times over the next 2 to 3 minutes I keep looking at an enemy Spitfire Mark IIA and a Ki-43 which are eventually chasing after one of our friendly H-6K bombers. The importance of this comes to life in the fact that those are two aircraft with much superior climb rates to the LaGG-3-8, yet their armaments are nothing to be in great awe about by comparison with what we have here. And so I'm going to provide the comparison of the characteristics of this plane and a good portion of the planes it flies alongside. We have the armament and the capacity to do a huge amount of damage, and we're going to show this again with this SBD-3 Dauntless, a well armoured plane being chased by a friendly Gladiator Mark II. Coming down from above, we make the Dauntless break out to the right and we quickly grab on 8th kill. We can see there, we only have to get a couple of shots onto target in usually a 1 to 2 second burst to make it count. Meanwhile the Gladiator, they may have had to have chased the Dauntless for a good 30 seconds and constantly put 7.7mm rifle rounds into the Dauntless to grab the kill. And so as we climb up once again, trying to restore our altitude and a semblance of speed, we continually look around seeing a Junkers 87 over our friendly ground units. Yet unfortunately for us, a good portion of our team also spot the straggling ground attacker. So I had look over towards an F2A Buffalo, probably trying to intercept or attack some of our ground units as well. In the meantime, looking up towards our friendly H6K, now at roughly 11 kilometers away and gradually decreasing, and its two assailants, simply because they are still going after the H6K. And this is more likely due to the fact that they're having to put a huge number of rounds into the target rather than the fact they're struggling to climb after it. Quite the reverse of what we have. The inability to climb well, but the ability to do the damage where it matters, even with the H6K now being set on fire by the enemy Ki-43. The F2A-1 Buffalo is quite unaware of our presence, and so we try to make them pay for it. Gradually making our way in behind them, and they have quite a significant portion of speed. It is a quite fast plane, so quite quick plane, and so we have to be careful. Yet here, we just haven't got the elevator response to break round onto the back of the Buffalo in time, and so we have to continue to follow them after a very sharp turn made by them, and even our own plane, to achieve our 9th kill, taking off their right wing. The Junkers 87 goes into the ground, and so at this point we decide to break up, and start to build up our energy, speed, and overall position once more. The Ki-43 is still putting rounds into the H6K. Now this is not a commentary on their accuracy or their ability to shoot a heavily armed and armoured target well, but I hope to point out here how much time they are spending pursuing a very heavily defended and armoured target by comparison with how long it has taken us. And so finally the H6K has passed away, roughly 2 to 3 minutes after they probably started to get into close proximity. And that is the difference, ladies and gentlemen, that you will find with the LaGG-3-8 by comparison with a good portion of the planes you can fly against. You have the ability to cripple anyone very quickly, but you have the inability to put yourself into that firing position unless you take very gradual steps. And so as we break around, we see that the Spitfire Mark IIA, coming down from above at quite a speed, I would say roughly 600 km an hour after their dive, is going to carry through and towards our friendly airfield, simply because nobody is able to keep up with them. And at this point I'm going to show you the rather poor overall build-up of speed, even in a gentle dive, that the LaGG-3-8 experiences, even when the Spitfire decides to make a number of manoeuvres which would compromise its speed quite noticeably. So here at roughly 2,400 meters I break into a dive from a speed of 380 km an hour, and my speed is building very gradually, not at the rate you would normally expect, by comparison with a number of the planes you can fly against. At 2,000 meters altitude now I've hit roughly 500 km an hour, but as we break this cliff line we are going to see that the Spitfire Mark II-8 has already left us in the distance somewhat, at 3.2 kilometers away, and they are building the distance from us. It is only after I drop another roughly 750 meters of altitude and put my speed at 615 kilometers an hour that the Spitfire actually makes life easier for us by braking around in an approximately 90-degree turn. And this is the problem. I have not got the engine power to catch my opponents. If this had been in, say, a P-36A Hawk, again we'd see the same problem. Meanwhile, if it was a biplane, we would have been able to catch the biplane in most circumstances unless they'd come out of an absolutely extreme dive. And so fortunately for us, the Spitfire plants himself right over our airfield, and the Spitfire either crashes into the ground or we manage to do enough damage to them to force them to go into the ground for our double ace. Nonetheless, I'll take what I can get in this plane, and as I climb up above the airfield, reducing my speed from roughly 500 km an hour in order to sacrifice it for some energy and altitude, we now have to come on to some of the performance characteristics in terms of speed and altitude, something which we have overlooked so far. I will be honest, the overall altitude performance range of this aircraft is negligible to an extent. Whilst below 2,000 meters altitude, you will find this plane actually performs worse than it normally does. I have found really beyond 2,500 meters there is very little to differentiate the performance of the plane until you hit about 7,000 meters altitude. So I will staple that between 2,500 meters to 7,000, this is really the ideal altitude range, and it suits well for the fact that at the start of the game we intercepted the enemy bombers at roughly an altitude range of 3,000 to 4,000 meters. There is a lot of capability with altitude for this plane, but it is the offset of the fact you may not be able to get yourself into that position. We are now only at 1,800 meters altitude, and we have to try and level out to build up our speed once again. Nonetheless, we now come onto the overall speed threshold of this aircraft. I find that if you keep the speed between 350 to 450 km an hour, you are going to find this plane responds at its maximum capacity. Yet, let us go back to the point about that F2A-1 Buffalo that we were chasing. I said that the elevator was sluggish, or I hinted at that at the very least. And you will find that whilst this plane has a rather powerful rudder and a great roll rate by comparison with a good portion of its contemporaries with speed, the elevators on the LaGG-3-8 are rather unresponsive. They are powerful once they are triggered, but it is getting the plane to respond initially which takes time. Additionally, the turn circle is not great. This plane can be outturned by the Yak-1, very slightly, but you will feel it over the course of a number of furball dogfights. Additionally, there are very few planes that you can actually outturn in this aircraft, which is why I personally feel it is not intended as a turn fighter. Yet in saying that, the high roll rate and powerful rudder mean that when you are put into a furball situation, so long as your speed is above, I would say 300 km an hour and not below that, you have the ability to essentially make double manoeuvres using your roll rate and shake your opponent off your tail and force them to either overshoot or plant themselves right in front of your guns by a succession of very sharp manoeuvres on the rudder. We break down for our 11th kill on a KI-43 Mark I, a very simple kill intercepting them whilst they were coming around on a friendly aircraft, and it's at this point that I am inhabiting the space right at the enemy spawn, of which I am very hesitant to do so in case I get jumped at the last minute. We can see that the enemy Blenheim down towards their airfield has been taken out, and there is only an enemy I-153 left standing. The I-153 Chaika is a highly manoeuvrable aircraft, as most of you are probably aware, and with almost a good portion of our team, roughly 5 of us, going after the I-153 now, I decide not to get enticed into the furball. I make a boom and zoom pass which I do not carry through to its end. Instead I break up and out, and realising there is an enemy Beaufort coming out of the spawn point, and that is the plane I can catch and get my guns onto. Meanwhile, the I-153 will have to deal with 4 friendly aircraft, of which the I-153 is going to take them all out, as we're going to see, as we meanwhile make our way after the Beaufort. If we had decided to stay in that furball, either the I-153 would have got onto the back of us and ripped us to pieces, and I will come on to a point about that very shortly, or we would have crashed into one of our friendlies or been taken out by the enemy flak. 3 fates which I am not particularly interested in receiving. And so now we return to the point about the difficulty with biplanes. At our battle rating, we will commonly be matched up against a good portion of biplanes and some of the early monoplanes. If you find yourself in a situation where you get a biplane on your tail and they are able to almost match you for speed, especially I-153s and KI-10s. I would not write your aircraft off, but you are going to have to fly as near level as possible whilst making very gradual jinks and gun defence manoeuvres in order to break away. You will by no means be able to outturn any of the biplanes, and additionally it is very hard to force a good portion of biplane pilots to overshoot you, because they have the ability to always manoeuvre back in behind you due to your lack of overall manoeuvrability in this aircraft. And that is why I encourage the energy fighter style of play, prioritising intercepting enemy bombers, because whilst we have the poor climb rate, we have the ability to put the bombers down a lot faster than everyone else. And so that is the major trade-off which I was talking about at the start of this review. This plane has some very good characteristics, but it has some which are just as bad. And as we come up underneath the Beaufort here, we're going to see that whilst we cannot keep up with the Beaufort in the long term, as the Beaufort Mark 8 is a very fast aircraft, we achieve a critical on their elevator, and with the last clasp effort of our burst, we managed to set their right wing on fire. Although this is not going to be enough, and so at this point we level out, making a couple of small jinking manoeuvres to avoid the rear gunner, and we begin our pursuit once again, reloading our cannon and machine gun. And one final weakness of this aircraft is that the ammo capacity is rather low. You will find that very quickly, especially when you first fly this aircraft, if you are new or old to War Thunder, that you will run out of ammunition well before you've obtained a good portion of kills. And so you're going to have to either be conservative on the trigger finger or build that reload skill up very quickly. Additionally, it's rather common to reload between engagements, simply because you never know when you're going to need all that ammo to bring a target down. The Beaufort makes life a little bit easier for us, breaking into a gradual turn, and with our friendly Heinkel 112 V5 also putting some 7.92mm machine gun ammunition to the target, we achieve our 12th kill, and that is the final one for this gameplay. We should note that the main comparison plane with this aircraft is the Yak-1, also in the Soviet Air Force, and the Heinkel 112, which I'll come on to very shortly after we look at some post-game stats. Therefore, we can see that our 12 kills and single assist allowed us to net 22,076 silver lions. On top of this, we had 1,661 research points, all going towards our research on the Yak-9. We hereby conclude our review of the LaGG-3-8 by making a quick comparison of the two planes which I feel are its equal if not superior at its battle rate in the 2.0, the Yakovlev Yak-1 and the Heinkel He-112A0. Starting with the Yak-1, it is a plane with similar armament, although switch out that single 12.7mm for two 7.62mm machine guns I believe. And with the Yak-1 you have a package which is much more of an all-round capability, being able to mix it up as both energy and turn fighter, but able to build up its speed a lot faster. Of course, the performance of the Yak-1 drops away at 5,000 meters altitude. That is rather irrelevant when you consider at your battle rating, it is rare to find a good portion of your opponents encroaching above even 4,000 meters altitude. At the same time, the Heinkel 112A0 has the powerful 20mm cannon, much like the LaGG-3-8. Yet, it does not have as high top speed, but it has the ability to maintain its manoeuvrability down to lower speeds of 250 km an hour, becoming exceedingly sluggish and uncontrollable beyond about 500 km an hour, as the LaGG-3-8 tends to do so as it passes beyond its limit. Therefore, we can see by these quick comparisons that the LaGG-3-8 is a second-rate energy fighter at best, and much like its historical counterpart, it is ill-suited for fighter interception roles, being more of a secondment to the Bomber Interceptor and versatile support function that it is. And using this approach, we came second on our team, because we intercepted the enemy bombers at the start of the game, who were left undefended, and then as we dived away and made our way down to lower altitudes, despite going against our overall performance nature, with our poor acceleration and very poor performance below 2,000 meters, we were able to assist a good portion of our friendlies in either taking down their more durable foes, such as that SPD-3 Dauntless versus the 7.7mm rifle caliber machine gun ammunition for our Gladiator Mark II, or when we chased after some opponents who were rather unaware of our ability to gradually make gains on them, such as that Spitfire Mark IIA, who assisted us in a huge extent by actually turning 90 degrees towards our airfield and allowing us to close the distance faster. However, we must emphasise the fact that this is not a fast aircraft despite being a monoplane, and so it is the player who makes gradual decisions and plays the game carefully and safely who will find the LaGG-3-8 is rather compatible with their playstyle. Because if you give yourself a little bit of time and employ some patience, you will eventually be able to position your opponents in front of your 20mm 12.7mm combination of firepower, and at which point you can deliver a deadly lag spike to the cockpit of that plane. And so I've been TX141, and if you've enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder videos on my channel. Yet until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and good luck in the skies!